So I want to talk about the big news of the week. You launched a Slack channel for Second Nature.
We did. And you know what it comes from is every single piece of feedback that we've gotten. Maybe that's a little overkill, but a lot of the feedback that we get are people listening to the podcast and saying, I feel like I have something else to add, or I'm speaking out loud while I'm listening to you guys on the pod. And I just have this one thing that I want to talk to you about. The other thing we get these like digest messages on LinkedIn or on Instagram, which is what we've always asked for and people are delivering. But it definitely feels like what needs to happen is the ability for the conversation to continue after the podcast is over. Because in an hour of us chatting back and forth and riffing on ideas, we've uncovered new things we want to talk about or got people thinking about stuff, and they need some place to like go have that conversation.
That
And
was always my feeling, just to chime in listening to both you and Dylan talk. I was like, I wanted to share my thoughts in what I had in terms of different elements. And it's so nice to have that opportunity now to do that.
yeah, it's early days for sure, and we're just getting the momentum going. But we made it free just to get everybody in. Maybe down the line we changed that, but we just want to get the ball moving with this thing because I think so much of us, we want to connect with other people. We want to have these discussions. We also are looking for people to share ideas with us, and I feel like a Slack channel makes that as easy as possible. We want to make this whole thing simple for everyone, but we also want to bring value to everyone, and having a Slack channel where everyone can communicate, connect with each other, share links and stories and job openings and everything. Our LinkedIn has been great at least starting to aggregate some of that stuff, but we could do it faster, better, and in a more meaningful way if we were all together in the Slack channel. So there is a link in our newsletter at secondnature.media. It'll be in the show notes of this podcast, and we'll start blasting it out. But this is sort of like the soft launch. Let's see what happens. But I think there's going to be some really interesting conversations, and we don't necessarily have a moderator yet, so hopefully everybody keeps it chill.
I'm sure they will. I'm really excited for it. I mean, I've already signed up, to be honest, and looking forward to the conversations that people want to have. And I think it could be a good inspiration for other topics for us to bring up in the future, or you and Dylan.
Yeah, absolutely. We, so much of this stuff has just been like, well, we're doing this already. Let's just go a step further. This
Yeah.
Second Nature was just a conversation that Dylan and I would have on a weekly basis already about the business of the outdoor. And then we made it a podcast. And then we've been having all these side conversations with our friends who listen to the podcast. Let's make it a Slack channel. Let's just make it so more people can be involved in these conversations and can get value or reap some sort of benefit from it. And that's sort of the impetus for why we started the Slack channel. I've got a couple other things up my sleeve, but I feel like this is a good next step to just continue the conversation post podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Go to the show notes, sign up. I'll see you there.
So yeah, I will be there. I'm excited. Like I love talking about this stuff, obviously, and to be able to do it more than twice a week is going to be pretty special. And again, we've had all these side conversations, and now it's time to like bring more people into that conversation. One of the other things that we want to do with the Slack channel is try to do like a monthly roundtable where we all jump on sort of like a Zoom call together. And so it's not just me and Dylan or me and you or a guest and us or whatever, but it's like everybody comes together and kind of shares their thoughts, or we bring in like an extra person that can, be an expert in the room that can educate everyone on something new. I feel like there's some really interesting opportunities that we can do with Slack that we might not be able to do with the podcast. So more to come, but we've soft launched it, I guess, just now. So here we go.
Yeah. You made it a moderator for that call. I'm guessing there are a lot of opinions out there that people want to share.
Which is great. That's why we're trying to get everybody in one spot so that we can share those opinions. And we've gotten so much good feedback so far, and not just in a positive way, but just like depth of feedback has been really good, of suggestions of things that we could do or ways we could go or what we could talk about. And I just want to encourage even more of that and make it where even if we don't get to it on the podcast, there's a place where you could still get value from that. Like, I don't know how many pages of notes you have for today.
I think I'm 6 this week.
Actually, there's 9.
Okay.
So, we're not going to get through all 9 pages of stuff, but on Slack, we could probably just copy paste most of this over there for people to see the links and see the background and stuff. So lots of opportunity there.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, well, let's dig into your 9-page document that you've
Deep
prepared.
dive into this week's news.
There's a new high watermark for preparation on Second Nature.
Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with performance?
Yeah, let's talk about performance.
Okay. And so this topic is one that I've sort of brought up because it's been interesting to watch some of the shifts that are happening in the industry, or what different brands are focused on at the moment. And I think you've seen that, and you brought it up in the past, talking about Lulu and their future sort of ultra running push that they had in order to sort of ground Lulu more in a performance based. You see the Nike ad, which was really centered around, winning, and that idea of performance. You see Light Spray with On coming out, and sort of creating those performance footwear that's really resonating sort of with those performance and elite runners. And I could go on and on. Another example that launched yesterday was North Face launched it's an interesting shoe. It's a trail shoe, but it's like an off trail shoe. But it's got Kevlar in it, and it's sort of a heavy base. But there's this interesting push that's happened to this performance. And I've been sort of thinking about why, and I'm interested to get your thoughts as well. But to go back in time a little bit, it's been an interesting time because a lot of these brands were built, a lot of the older brands were built off performance. They really started with this idea of an athlete and solving athlete problems. And then sort of athleisure came in. Think of the 2010s to today, where people are moving more towards that comfortable product. And in doing so, that athleisure market became huge, and a amazing place to find growth for a lot of these companies, because performance was kind of ticking along. But if companies really wanted to grow quickly, they ended up moving into the athleisure space. But everybody ended up focusing there. And a lot of brands were actually started in there. Like, I would actually say, like, brands like Viore, et cetera, are more in that athleisure space, and then potentially that performance side of things. And they could be used for performance, but it created its own ecosystem. But in doing so, that the trends now have sort of somewhat run their course. So if you look at things like the resale market, feels like it's sort of been saturated. If you look at the collaborations, everybody's kind of finding a way to collaborate to be in that space. And that's the way that people were creating newness. And people were also looking for materials and fabrics that were really comfortable. But that has sort of run its course. And I think people are looking for the next thing. And in order to push that next thing, a lot of brands are looking towards innovation. But it's hard to innovate in that leisure space, because that's really a style choice, really, at the end of the day, and not necessarily a performance choice. And so I think all these brands are starting to say, all right, I need to continue to grow. I need to go somewhere. Where do I go? And they're rerouting back into this idea of performance, because performance allows you an opportunity to then innovate. It gives you a consumer challenge that I can actually solve through innovation. And in doing so, it creates authenticity for those brands in that performance, which, again, if you look at the athleisure, is probably going to be a little bit more of a cyclical cycle for them, where the performance is a steadfast sort of marketplace. And so it grounds them in that location, and then it allows them actually to go back to athleisure and take that across. And I think a good example of that is On with their Light Spray, where they created it. They had the top women's finisher at Boston Marathon, and then they have Zendaya wearing it as well. And so it's able to pull across, and so it's innovation with meaning that can be used for lifestyle. So I think you're seeing brands going to make this swing over the next couple months, and it's going to be a really exciting time to see how brands end up playing that out. And to be honest, I think some of the innovation is going to be amazing to see. Some are just going to label the next model innovative, which is disappointing at best. And then it's going to see how these two now work in concert. But I wanted to get your thoughts on how that's moving.
I think athleisure is so subjective in terms of if it's good or not, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's fashion, it's design. Do you like it? Does it resonate with you, or doesn't it? You are at the mercy of the viewer, of the people looking at the actual product and what they think of it, where it's a fact if you've actually done innovation. We actually took this step forward. We added this thing. We figured out this thing. It's a lot easier to tell a story about innovation than it is like, well, this looks cool. We like the way it looks and feels, and you will too. I think it's almost easier to do the innovation thing than it is to just keep having stylish stuff because like you said, consumers are fickle and what they like this season probably won't be what they like next season. And that's got to be a lot harder to track. Whereas you can go back to basics and just be like, you know what, let's just work on developing something new. That's a playbook that you can continually go back to. And in my world of mountain biking, that's the only game in town. Just make it lighter, stronger, faster, more expensive.
Yeah.
Uh, like everyone's they're just stuck in this trap of telling the technology story over and over and over. I can't even tell you how many different suspension platforms exist at this point where they're literally having to go make up words for what the suspension does because they're just trying to add the next thing and the next thing. And there is no style component necessarily to that. So I also think it's sort of a pendulum swinging, and in every industry, there's a pendulum, right? So you have had the pendulum all the way over here on the style fashion side, and now it's going to swing over because somebody did it first. They zigged when everybody else was zagging, and then they got a little breakthrough. They got that little media boost. They got a little extra, running start over here. Now everybody and the entire pendulum is probably coming in that direction because
Yes.
it's not a very crowded space right now, unfortunately,
Yeah.
or fortunately, I'm not sure. So, how long does it take for the actual pendulum to swing? Is the question I want to know.
Yeah, I think it's moving pretty quickly. And the good news is, at the end of the day, I think the consumer wins in many ways. They're the ones that end up benefiting because they're getting lighter and faster product. They're getting more interesting things to actually work with and become better athletes with. And you look at some of the times that were at UTMB last week, and it's amazing to see them breaking records again and again and again, year after year after year. And part of that is athlete training, but other part of it is some of the technology. And so it makes that sport exciting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to Katie Scheid from
Yeah.
one of the North Face athletes, smashed the UTMB record by a substantial margin. And Dylan would be the person to talk all about why this is, so important and meaningful and North Face's involvement in there. But what a cool thing to see a record like that actually fall. And a North Face crew has got to be pretty happy right
Yeah.
now.
They're pretty
Sure.
pumped. I've seen some LinkedIn posts. People are pretty excited.
I mean, that's the best part about working for a brand and then having athletes and having projects and having all this stuff is being able to be part of that team and sharing that out and getting excited about it. Like the innovation also plays into that of being able to tell your story and share what you've been working on. When you come up with just the latest in fashion, I feel like it's just harder to tell stories around it. What's sort of interesting that I saw recently on did something with FKA Twigs,
Mm,
sort of the next influencer, I guess, in their lineup. Maybe influencer isn't the right word, but the next person that's famous that's working with On, in the way that she's doing more. Again, it's more of the style, the fashion, the art side of athleisure and sport and everything. Interesting to see them continue to go in that direction with
yeah.
it.
It feels
Um,
like they're polarizing. Like they're providing the brand or they're showing the consumer that they have breadth. They can be both performance on one side and that more stylish on the other. And then as a result, they're everything in between, which is probably where the consumer is somewhere in there, right? Like they're
yeah.
not winning Boston and they're not Twigs, but it shows that they can be there and that the brand has a role for that consumer, no matter where they are in that space.
I think we talked about the pendulum going both ways, but I think a brand like On or any brand that's really trying to break through and stay on top has to do both of those things. They can't actually pick one or the other because that in between, I heard this referred to recently as the airport shoe. So, like, what is the comfortable shoe you're going to wear while you're flying somewhere? Well, that's probably the more basic, shoe that On has or Nike has or whoever,
Yeah.
and so you have to go in both directions to offer something to either side to show like these are actually stylish shoes and these actually are high performance shoes. And I don't know if it was you or someone else was talking about like, okay, Hokas are really great for like, people who are trying to run ultra marathons and like my parents. But like, what is the fashionable Hoka shoe that takes the place of the Samba or the Air Jordan? Like, where's that?
Yeah. How do
Thank
they
you.
bring that to life? Because
Yeah.
that's a great space to be in. Um, and it is the authenticator, right? Like if it's good enough for Jim Walmsley to be running in, like, it should be good enough for me to walk through the airport. And so is this a bit of a validation that it resonates with consumers, I think.
Yeah, exciting.
You also, can I bring up one more? You also mentioned the Puma shoe. Do you want to talk about the Puma shoe for a hot
Yeah,
second?
sure. Sure. So Puma dropped this shoe. It is called well, I think there's a bunch of them, but it's like the Puma RB Nitro Elite. They put all the words
That's
in
a
the
that's a
name,
mouthful.
right? So basically the designers that they work with went through and broke every possible rule that you could make. So these are illegal shoes if you were going to race in any sort of, NCAA or world marathon, whatever it is that you're going to be sanctioned and racing in. These are illegal. They are against the rules because they're built to just make you super fast and just do everything that you could possibly do to a pair of shoes, to the point where the heel of the shoe doesn't even sit on the ground.
Yeah, I would struggle.
There are some weird looking shoes, but I kind of want to try them out.
Yeah.
What's interesting is a lot of the articles are like, oh, this is provocative. They're selling, 1,000 of these. That looks like the price point's $260 for a pair of these shoes. I think, or maybe it's, no, I'm sorry, $349 for a pair of these shoes. They look insane. Is it a play up the performance side of the brand, or is it a fashion thing that I don't know, like, where
Yeah.
does this actually sit, or why would a brand do something like this?
Yeah. I mean, personally, I really like it as an anchor. It shows that they are innovative enough that they can break the rules, and that's kind of exciting for people. And even if consumers don't buy that shoe, they might buy the next one down that's 260 that is legal, that has sort of the best of the best technology. I think it's a great indicator for them that they're pushing the boundaries and they are an innovative brand and that they actually have a performance side, because Puma's been, I think I would argue, largely known as more of that lifestyle, again, as a brand, but it indicates to consumers that there is possibility and they're pushing that limit, and I think that resonates with consumers.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting too that, like, you can sell it as an illegal shoe, but someone was making the point of, like, well, most cars that are on the road today are technically illegal by F1 standards. Like, it
Yeah.
breaks some rule in F1. So what does illegal actually mean? But again, it's sort of like, well, this is an illegal shoe that you can get. There's an angle there. There's a story to be told. So not only is it an interesting shoe that's like high performance, but you can also have some fun with, like, this is an illegal shoe that you can't race with, or I
Yeah.
don't know. There's
Runners
something
love
there.
irreverence. They
Yeah.
love that a little bit. We talked about this last time, the counterculture.
Yeah.
The breaking two is a good example of that as well.
Yeah.
It's a good play. Nice.
It's they're some fun looking shoes. I don't know. I don't think you'll catch me in them, but
I'm not going to be able to catch you in them. You'll be too fast. Dad jokes.
amazing. Amazing. Okay, let's move on to the next line item we've got here. We outside
Mm,
purchased Map My Run. So Map My Run, there's actually Map My Trail, Map My Ride, and Map My Run. It's kind of a bunch of different apps that do exactly that. I think there's MapMyFitness too, which is like a food tracking app. So there's a lot of different stuff that's kind of in this little cluster of digital content. Outside Plus actually has things like Trail Forks, which is how you would find trails to go ride or run on. What do you think is the strategy by Outside to buy this off of Under Armour? Or do you have any other insight on this acquisition?
Yeah, it's I saw this and I found it really interesting because if we flash back to what happened in 2015, so 2015, Under Armour is doing really well with consumers. They're seeing a number of different brands have connection with consumers to create almost its own ecosystem or connection with those consumers. And a Nike is probably a good example with Nike Plus Run Club and Nike Plus Training Club, etc. And the brand, I think, really had a strong idea, and they really went after this idea of collecting consumer data and using apps. So they purchased MyFitnessPal, the all of the apps that you just mentioned, and they brought them in house. And I think the concept is take all of this consumer data and be able to leverage it because you know what activities each of these consumers are doing. How do you then be able to market to them very specifically based on what those activities are? And in doing so, you sort of create this ecosystem that consumers are coming back to you over and over again because you know them the best as a consumer. Um, Now you sort of flash forward a couple of years. I think the brand, as we talked about last time, ran into some product troubles and had to manage inventory. So I think if I was to make a guess, I have no inside knowledge on this, but they shifted their focus a little bit away from this strategy. And at the end of the day, it's really hard to take these apps and then integrate their back ends. Everybody kind of thinks that the front ends are sometimes hard to map together, but skinning the front is a challenge, but it's not nearly as hard as managing all of this different personal information from each of these consumers and then being able to leverage it. And so it just I really like that strategy for them. I thought it was going to be a pretty strong one. I'm sad to see it that didn't sort of pan out that way as well as I think everybody thought. But yeah, and so now with that context, outside magazines kind of coming in and they're actually now purchasing it, and they do, as you mentioned, have all these other apps. I have some thoughts on what the strategy is. My take on it is I- I'm actually interested if they're shifting who their customer is. Is the consumer now actually the the ad companies, because outside now has access to all of these different people, because they have a broad spectrum that they cover. They have Velo News, they've got Outside Magazine. They actually cover several different activities that people do. And are they kind of pushing that subscription model and trying to make a subscription model work, or is it that they now have access to a million people, a million paid subscribers that they can sort of leverage with some of these smaller brands and say, for example, Hoka or On, I can access these consumers. I've got them in their regular feed that they can see from their activities and as well as the media that they see on TV or in the magazines. Are they sort of starting to build some weight in order to be able to flex on these smaller companies to use it to capitalize on the eyeballs that they have? So I'm interested in your thoughts on that play.
Yeah, that's a great question of is outside looking to add value to Map My Run and that ecosystem, or are they looking for Map My Run to add value to outside? Which if they were going to leverage, the users of those apps as additional advertising space, that makes sense. Versus could this ecosystem actually tie into outside? I don't know. I'm not 100% sure where I sit on this whole thing. I I'm curious too because outside already has a portfolio of this stuff, and I would have assumed something like Strava would have been a reasonable partner because that's
Yes.
more of the mountain biker, trail runner type person, where Map My Run, Map My Fitness, all that stuff feels a little bit more of like it doesn't seem as congruent to outside,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
That seems more like the gym and 5K, 10K type runners that are out, maybe outside, but they're probably on treadmills. They're probably in the gym versus like mountain bikers and trail runners are actually outside, hence the alignment with outside
Yeah.
and their media subsidiary. So it's kind of an interesting thing, but you're right. I hadn't really considered who the actual consumer is that outside is interested in developing
Yeah.
and their ability to essentially double their numbers in terms of reach as a result of this acquisition could very well be that. Or it could be using the apps to basically, okay, you've got one subscription to all the things. It's almost like all the roll-ups that were done with like Hulu and Paramount Plus and whatever else, where it's like, hey, you can watch this live and you can, have access to this library and you can have access to this over here by just this one subscription instead of having to have cable plus internet plus whatever. So is this the first, streaming service type acquisition, build it one stop shop could probably be one of the ways that they're going towards it as well.
Yeah. And I'd love to go back to the Strava comment that you have, because I think that is one of the interesting nuances that has shifted since 2015 to now, is that the way that consumers are actually using sort of these different apps is different. And I think I mean, you had Aura on. I've got my watch. What you end up seeing now that's happening is everybody's there's sort of companies that are collecting the data, and then there are apps that are sharing the data. For example, if I go on a ride, I collect my data in Garmin, and it distributes it through Strava, and there are different purposes for those. And I feel like the MapMyFitness, suite is a little bit of the recording still, when it's a real barrier because people are wearing their watches, they're wearing their Aura rings or their Whoops, or Apple's adding advanced features to their watch to be able to do this. The bringing in of the data is the interesting one. I think the opportunity really lies is how do you share it out.
Mhm.
um, and maybe they convert it, maybe that's their strategy, is they convert that to more of a social platform
Yeah.
than necessarily a tracking location.
See, this is the galaxy brain idea here with this, right? Is like you were saying about the social component of it. Outside probably knows where these people are as well. Actually, they both probably know where these people are. They also know what activities you care about. And outside, I mean, they're writing articles about, this group here, this trail system here, here's where this is. If you could just take all that data and say, like, hi, you're running in this area a lot. You should check out this run club. It's awesome. And here's a little bit more information about it. Like, how do you actually connect enthusiasts in a place together? We share these things because we're recording our activities, telling and signaling that these are the things we care about. How do you then add to that through the reach and resources that you have as outside media to say, oh, by the way, there's a outside festival just down the street from you this, in July that you guys should all go to. How do you leverage that information to connect people in real life? And I think that's really something that could be the next step of all this stuff. Now that you have the data, you know where everybody is, you know what sports they're doing. How do you then connect them with valuable experiences? That's the thing that's missing. That's great that you can track it. That's great that you can serve the media, but everybody can kind of do that now. Like at any given time, there's a billion marketers trying to show you where you should go and what you should do. But how do you personalize it to, like, we know you're in this area and that you care about this sport. Here's something awesome that you should go and experience.
Yes, and I think that's the power of them having that data. They hopefully can pull that off.
Yeah.
I don't know. It'll be fun to watch.
If I'm outside or adjacent to that group, I'm basically trying to come up with an event strategy to be able to send people to. Imagine if there was some sort of outside series similar to the festival maybe, but just
Yeah,
like for each sport, because you would know what are the most popular things to do in these areas, and then you would just direct everybody to it using the ability, using the different resources within the apps and the platforms to, like, build up these events. It's almost a cheat code for how to create experiential things.
yeah. And if I was to make a connection to your podcast earlier, um, with TTL, it'd be interesting if you actually then created experiences off of it. You could see them kind of moving into that space based on the
Yeah,
knowledge that they have.
yeah.
That'd be crazy.
Outside, hit us up. We got you.
We appreciate all the writing.
All right.
Nice.
Well, okay, let's switch tact a little bit. You have something on here about Foot Locker versus JD Sports. Can you fill me in a little bit more on what this is all about?
Yeah, sure. So this was an interesting article that came out this week that was talking about. I think we'll link it up in the show notes, but it talked about uh, that both Foot Locker and JD Sports are approaching um, their their retail expansion or contraction very differently at the moment. And for a little bit of background, Foot Locker is sort of at the moment scaling back. I think they're closing 525 stores this year between Foot Locker and a couple of their other subsidiaries. They're sort of re-centralizing a lot of their best stores and focused on those locations. They're also innovating in some of their stores. Like in New York, they've got a Jordan Foot Locker store that just launched concept. That's pretty cool. But they're sort of constricting. They're kind of trying to do less and become better at those things that they're doing. And then on the opposite side, you've got JD, which is another retailer that's based out of the UK and has a strong presence in Europe that is expanding pretty heavily in the United States. And they've acquired Finish Line. They just bought over 1,000 stores of Hibbets, which is pretty interesting. And so they are very much in this expansionary mode throughout the country, throughout the US. And the article just sort of explores the two and which you think is going to win. So I'm interested in your thoughts on who you think might win, or what are the benefits of each.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd never actually even heard of JD Sports until you mentioned it, and it's helpful that they're a UK, but they're expanding into the States in a pretty major way and leaning into the brands that are established, like Finish Line makes a ton of sense there. Actually, maybe the idea is that whoever wants to win partners with Outside to put on those events.
Yeah.
I do think that it has a lot to do with the ground game of both retail locations, and you could probably speak to this with your Nike experience of what it looks like to run in a specific market. But I think whoever it is, whichever it is, they need to have something experiential that people can not only come into their store but have a brand experience in whatever location they're at or near, right? And so having that voice in the market on the ground, creating and being a part of these experiences, I feel like one of the big things that I'm seeing everywhere is that people are looking. They've been trapped in their houses for however many years. They're trying to get outside. They're trying to get more active. They're trying to be involved and meet people and kind of kickstart everything again, which might also have something to do with the whole, athleisure versus performance. Like we
Yeah.
were wearing a lot of athleisure gear for the last couple of years. Now we're getting back outside and, enjoying the outdoors and meeting up with people again. And I think whoever is going to win this battle between JD and Foot Locker is going to be the one that captures that localized audience and then does something that's meaningful to them to give them a reason to continue coming into their shop.
Yeah. I agree. If I think about it from the Foot Locker side, I like that they're kind of cleaning house a little bit, right? They're focusing on what their strength is, and I think they're gonna try to push their strength going forward, and it's a step back in order to move in the right direction. So I like that for them. I also like JD's moving into new global markets, and it's not new for them, but they are expanding that. I think moving into different geographies is really going to help them in terms of the fluctuations that you see in each of the markets. So let's say if Europe's exploding and the US isn't doing well, they've got strong European locations. But if it ends up switching and the US ends up doing well and Europe's footwear market starts to struggle a little bit, there's this nice balance or safety net that they have that they can look to those other geographies. So I really like that. But at the end of the day, who do I think wins? I actually think Dick's wins at the end of the day. And so we didn't talk about Dick's, but Dick's is the biggest, one of the biggest players in the U.S. They're in largely a lot of the same locations, and they are doing really well. They had a great earnings that they just posted, and the interesting part about what they said in their earnings is, well, two things. One, they're looking to expand more into that lifestyle side. They own the performance. They have that opportunity in footwear to move to the lifestyle. And I think they're doing it in appropriate steps with the appropriate brands. They brought up Puma, they brought up On, they brought up Hoka. That seems like it was going to resonate with that consumer. Those consumers are already going through their doors. The one thing they don't have quite like JD does is that geography that we talked about. So I like that side of it, but I think I appreciate their caution. They are a bit of a juggernaut in the industry and one to watch for, and so I kind of see them actually continuing to do well.
I wonder what JD pulls over in terms like it's if it's a UK based group and one of the biggest fastest growing sports in the US is soccer, and JD is, I mean, if you're from the UK, right, like that is religion over there. So what are the best practices that they have over there that they could adapt over here to then put out that might actually put them ahead of both Dick's and Foot Locker as soccer continues to grow? Like the level of fandom in the UK and how people are so locked in, may have something to do with how it's presented at retail, how it's presented in media, how it's presented through local activation. Is there something that JD knows when it comes to mainstream sports that actually might be a leg up on the existing brands here as UK sports kind of take hold in the States?
Yeah. I think that's a good point. Um, it also brings up that idea of their model or how do they come to life at retail. And it seems, and it's been a hot minute since I've been in a JD Sports, to be honest. But the last time I was in there, it was a lot. It was a lot of brands and a lot of footwear styles for people to choose from. And based on our last conversation of that shoe of summer of what's going to emerge, they have they kind of have the canvas or enough styles for consumers to choose from to help sort of make those selections where Foot Locker feels like they have a smaller, more focused assortment, which can be very good for local and really connecting with that local consumer as you bring up.
Mhm.
But it may limit them in the variety or the types of consumers that are moving through that door to expand out beyond that. And so I'm interested to see how those two play out.
Hmm. Fun to watch this one, and I'll be curious to hear what everybody's kind of stuff is. And you know what? We have a Slack channel. I don't know if you knew that, but if
What?
people have different opinions, they could jump into the Second Nature Slack channel and let us know too. Or we're still on LinkedIn and Instagram, but yeah, we'll
Yeah. Put
see
it
what
in the
everybody.
Slack channel, put it in LinkedIn,
Let
YouTube.
us know what you think. Yeah. Okay, well, let's continue on the retail side of things. You had a point here about Lululemon removing the breeze through pants from the market, which actually like impacted their stock of decent amount, right?
Yeah. I think the stock's down almost, what is it, 49% in the article that we read.
From a pair of pants.
Well, not just from a pair of pants. There's a lot going on with them at the moment, and it's actually that's a really interesting topic in itself. This is kind of a bit of a throwback? I think they pulled it in July, but it's come up again in their most recent investor call because as sort of a what they're doing to help mitigate that. But you did see the stock price decline again, despite the company doing very well. So there's a whole side to that they're not quite meeting the growth expectations the street has, but the brand is doing solidly. But the Breeze pant came out. They launched it. It was going to be a sort of it's what sounds like a pretty significant style for them, and they try to sort of change different things in terms of it seems like a lighter material. It has a slightly different cut than the others, and it didn't necessarily land with consumers the way they wanted it to. There were some seam issues where people said there was rubbing. Additionally, there's the way it's cut, it creates a V in the back that wasn't really resonating with consumers, and as a result, they ended up pulling, which is a fair amount of money, that product from the marketplace and said, all right, we're going to come back when we have a better product and we're going to try to accelerate that, but we're going to bring better product to market. But that definitely had an impact of the stock price. So investors were kind of nervous about it. I want to get your thoughts. Do you think it was the right call, even though it created that impact, or no?
You know what this really makes me think of, which it's such a hilarious whatever, but the Minecraft movie trailer dropped yesterday. I don't know if
Oh, I
your
didn't see
kids
it.
saw this yet. It's garbage. It's awful, which is crazy to me. And this, I'm going to bring it back to the outdoor industry here. Just hang with me for this analogy.
Yeah,
But basically, Minecraft is one of the biggest, it is actually the number one topic on YouTube by content created about it, right? There are hours and hours and probably centuries worth of content produced about this. In fact, there are multiple movies, like fan made movies, that already exist and have tens of millions of views
that's
on
amazing.
YouTube, right? This is a thing already. But of course, nobody could help themselves. They had to make a Minecraft movie and put all the most famous people in it. And it is absolutely, the trailer is just awful to the point
It's not good.
where showing it to my 8-year-old who's obsessed with Minecraft, I got like a meh. And that right there is like the worst possible sign. This is absolutely going to flop and it's going to be a nightmare for everybody who is involved. Lots and lots of people are going to lose millions, maybe billions of dollars off this thing. When the Minecraft movie could have easily been $1 billion blockbuster. This could be the next Avatar or whatever, because there is an audience that is frothing for it.
Yeah.
It's so clear what they need to do to be successful. And there are a lot of people who have opinions who could have told you before you release this out into the wild if it was good or not. So now here's the part where I bring it back to
Okay,
Lululemon.
good.
It's not like they haven't made pants before. It's not like they don't have a lot of people that are really excited about this product. And it's not like they don't have a handful of people that could tell you, hey, this feels weird or this looks weird when people wear it. Where are those people for both Lululemon and for the Minecraft production house? Why aren't they jumping in and being like, time out for fun? This doesn't work. Let's not release this to the public. So the fact that they're even at a point where they have to recall something because it's terribly designed and doesn't work just leaves me scratching my head like where is the energy? Where is the focus if not on the thing that is supposed to be your main deal?
Yeah. Where's the pre-testing? Where is the yeah, we would dial test, for example, the trailer and see how consumers are feeling as they go through. Where's that before going to market? What's the
Yeah.
pre-check? And it's interesting, the bigger brands, we talked about this, they have very long go-to-market processes. And so even if there is an issue, you likely can't change it to like in motion, right? Like even once you get your protos and so on, it's hard to make additional changes because you have to kind of keep moving. And so even if they did, they may have sort of made those a change in or change it in the next version that comes out, which is why they may be able to pull forward some of the next product. I'm not saying they knew, but maybe they did have some indication that in protos that, oh, we want to just adjust this and this, and like how do you sort of pull it? And so yeah, it's an interesting challenge.
It's one thing when you're doing the high performance thing where you're like, we're going to make a really weird looking shoe for Puma, and no one is going most people won't buy it because it looks so weird, but at least it makes a statement. I just can't get anything in these breeze through leggings that actually make a statement that would be even reasonable. It just seems like they put a dud out into the market,
Yeah.
which was like, it was preventable, I think is what I'm trying to say
Yeah.
between the Minecraft analogy and this. Like, this is wholly preventable and someone's attention is not on the right thing.
Mm.
And
Shots
yeah.
fired. From my side, I love that they pulled the tight. I actually really appreciate that. I think a lot of times when looking at building brand health and brand equity, a consumer's trust is gained in drops and lost in buckets. And so for them to make the statement that the consumer is the most important thing, and if this is not the right thing for you, the consumer, we're going to pull it. We're not going to leave it out there. We're not going to discount it. We're not going to try to push it out through other channels. It keeps that idea that the consumer is that important to them, and they do get to keep that premium nature to it. That people are spending the money to have a top quality product. And if it doesn't meet that standard and they agree to it and they sort of pull it off, it indicates to them that they are only going to give you the best. And so I actually appreciate it. They did it. I think it's going to blow over. It's going to breeze through the
Oh,
media cycle. Thank you.
yeah.
And no one's going to think about it in another 3 months. And it's just going to be the brand's going to continue to move on and actually potentially gain ground with consumers.
I like that line. It's gained in drops and lost in buckets. That's
Yeah,
good. I
building
like that.
building a brand. Yeah.
That is really interesting to think about. And yeah, they've done so much work, just carving it out and really building that trust. And you're right. It's the right thing to do to pull it. I absolutely agree with that. But it feels like an unnecessary
Yeah. Could it have been avoided? That's a good
probably.
question. Yeah.
How is somebody not just like, hey, this looks weird?
Wait a minute.
Well, it's there's always that success theater in brands and businesses where maybe you're not looking for like what's actually wrong here, but you're trying to tell the story internally of why something might be good. And it seems like people are always trying to look on the bright side of things, like, well, here's all the reasons why the breeze through leggings are great. And you're
Yeah.
just like, but the reality of the situation, guys, like just turn off the success theater for a second. These don't look that good, and I've seen it a million times over where people are just kind of getting high on their own supply and then they put out a dud because they couldn't be honest with themselves or with their coworkers.
Yeah. Or talking to consumers.
Yeah.
Again, I think
Yeah.
that's really important.
You know what they could benefit from?
What?
An insight accelerator.
That
How's that for a transition?
was well done. Big week for me too.
Tell me about it. Tell me about the launch of Insight Accelerator.
Yeah. So for the last couple of months, I've been working on doing some consulting, and then over the weekend, finally codified everything into one plan, and sort of made the announcement of launching Insight Accelerator, which is a bit of a consulting company on my side. And the it basically has three pillars. Are you interested in the three pillars? Happy to
I am.
share.
Yeah.
Um, there are three elements, and the first one is uh, and I think a lot of people that are listening can relate to this, where if you're a PLM or a designer or a marketer, your job is those things. Your job is not consumer research. That being said, 10% of the time of your 10% of your responsibility is going out and talking to consumers. The hard part is there isn't necessarily a course out there that kind of teaches you what this is. There is in the course that I teach, but in your regular college or whatnot, there isn't a course that says here's how to do or how to perform consumer research and how to become literate in consumer research. And so people pick up all of these different methodologies as they move along, and some of them are good and some of them are a bit biased. And so the first pillar of what I'm focused on is being able to do some corporate education and some grounding, leveraging all of the educational materials that I have to teach people how to go perform sort of research confidently in market, how to sort of be able to plan for research in the future and how to be able to communicate that research. I'll ask a rhetorical question like, what's the best consumer research book you've read? And here's the deal, there isn't one. All the books are researchers talking to researchers, and so this sort of hopefully fills the gap for these companies that don't have consumer researchers, but still want to be able to have that skill set. So that's the first pillar. The second pillar is then takes that to the next level. If training people creates literacy, if you do need somebody that actually needs to come in and perform research at a very high level, that is somewhat complicated. You need a sort of that mastery level. I can come in and help in that situation, and I've got partners that can come in and help as well. And so doing consulting on that side, whether it's segmentation or you've got a new product launching or marketing, happy to help there. And then the third one is really what I've heard the most is that consumer researchers are really good at performing consumer research, but they may not always be the best at communicating that to stakeholders and being able to drive change throughout the organization. The feedback I've always received is it's this combination that I've been able to provide, which is both strategy and the consumer research, and be able to communicate that to drive action. How do you take those insights, create stories, create communication plans, and be able to drive that in through the organization so it actually lands at the end of the day? And so that's sort of the third pillar, being able to help facilitate making that happen for people. And so that's the company. I'm really excited and interested to see where it goes.
That's so cool. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll have no trouble finding people that need that level of insight and the ability to actually do something, with it.
Yeah.
I've said it a few times on the pod, but one of my favorite quotes is like, if we did the things we knew we needed to do, we'd all be billionaires with perfect abs.
Yeah.
And I think like you can have all the insights in the world, but if you can't actually put them into action, what use is it?
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
I think that's like a really necessary pillar to have.
Hence Insight Accelerator. Yeah. So if you're interested at all learning more, I'm happy to connect. Hit me up in the Slack, or I'm also on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, how's it looking for you? You got a BPC for this week?
I do.
All right.
Should I go first? You want to go?
Yeah.
All
Go
right.
for it.
I'll go first. So what's happening at the moment is the 37th America's Cup, which is really exciting. And it may not seem exciting if you don't follow sailing or you don't know what's going on, or your last reference was Dennis Conner and America Cubed. Sailing has changed, and it's changed a lot. And going back to that whole idea of performance and innovation, these boats are not the boats that your dad used to watch for sailing. These boats are now all on foils, so they're actually sailing above the water, which is pretty amazing. They've got incredible technology that now is enabling them to basically travel at 50 miles per hour, 3 times the speed of the wind. And they've become very fast, very exciting races. And so it's been fun to watch that. And I think it's for people, it's a great one to go see for some design inspiration or some performance inspiration. I also like the topic because I know there are a number of cyclists that end up following this podcast. The teams are actually recruiting track cyclists because they put out amazing numbers. And so typically in sailing, there's a grinder, somebody who basically mans a winch in order to be able to either pull the foils up or pull the sail in or trim the sail, etc. And in order to do that, typically they've used their hands to be able to grind a line that would make that shift. But that was inefficient in compared to using your legs. So what they've done is they put stationary bikes basically in these boats, and they put track cyclists in there to be able to grind. And the expectation is, in order to kind of make the team, apparently, is you have to be able to hold 450 watts for 20 minutes. You have to hold 580 for 8 minutes, I think, and then 1,100 for at least 30 seconds, which for like just the 400 for 20 minutes, that's twice what I can put out. These are actually amazing athletes that they put into place to be able to execute. So it's kind of fun to watch that shift in sailing over time.
Yeah, that if you could do that level of output on a mountain bike, you would actually be on the podium of a World Cup
Yeah.
event. Like that's not common. I can't do
No,
that.
no.
That's out of control. I was actually involved in the gosh,
The
what year was
Alinghi?
it? I was in the 34th America's Cup because
Yeah.
that was in San Francisco, and Red Bull was really involved in that one. So I was kind of the guy on the ground. I got to ride on one of those boats,
That's amazing.
and I actually started Jimmy Spithill's Twitter account for him, which he was like
That's cool.
he was the winning captain. I don't know, like
Yeah.
he was in charge of the boat that won, and that was actually the greatest comeback in sporting history because they were down. The other team needed like one more win, and then they ended up winning like 7 or 8 in a row to win. That was really
Yeah.
exciting, and I remember having a front row seat to so many of those meetings and listening to them trying to position America's Cup, because at that point this is before they switched to, actually this is the year that they put those foils in for the first time, and they were trying to position it as like the F1 of the water. How do we make this the F1 of the water? Everything about America's Cup is so interesting.
Yeah.
Just even the way that it operates, like basic stuff like all of the plugs, because it's just like moves from country to country.
Yeah.
So actually all the plugs are European plugs. So like you'd go to work in like their media center and you'd have to bring a thing to modify your thing. I don't know. I could talk all day about America's Cup. That was a really cool experience
I
to
bet.
see.
Because being the first year, it was kind of wild when they started foiling.
Yeah.
Everybody was learning at the same time, and the crashes were spectacular. Like when things went wrong, they went wrong really drastically, really quickly. And so
Yeah.
it was kind of a wild time to see it. They're a little bit more, they understand everything better now.
Yeah.
But yeah, interesting. You got to ride on that. That's cool.
It was terrifying. And for someone who's never seen it, a foil is basically like a a board that sticks out of the bottom of the boat, and the way that it's designed actually causes the boat to lift off of the water and just zip through the water like 6 or 8 feet out of the water. It looks really
It's flying.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just insane to watch that whole thing happen, which is yeah, everything about it is just out of control.
Yeah. So catch it. It's worth watching.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I had a couple of different ones I was going to use for BPC this week, but I think what I want to talk about is this new DJI drone. It's called the Neo, and it will basically fit in your pocket. It's under $200, and I am going blue in the face trying to explain to people why they need to be content creators, because I think that the opportunity of demonstrating your expertise on the internet is underrated.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are afraid to capture their content. They don't want to have to walk around with a camera and set it up and then talk to it. And this Neo drone that DJI just came in with is so light and so small. There was this Hover X1, which was the other drone where it like kind of fold up and you could put it in your pocket. DJI basically came out with like their own version of that, and that's what just launched. And I've got a DJI drone, but this one is even smaller and even more compact and easy to travel with and easy to capture content. And whatever makes content capture easy for more people, I'm all for. I've got this the DJI Osmo Pocket here, and this thing fits in your pocket too. And it's a gimbal and it's 4K, and it's just more people need to do it, because the opportunity is so huge for anybody making content, whether it's a podcast, a newsletter on Substack, a YouTube channel, anything. Just go out and make content, and we can go deep on how to do it and why. But yeah, I'm excited that it just keeps getting easier and easier to make better and better content, and this is a great example of
Yeah,
exactly
and I'm
that.
guessing one of the innovations that helps that is that lightness, because I think
Yeah,
you need a pilot's license for over 200 grams or 400 grams. I can't remember quite what it is, but I'm assuming this is actually lighter than that, and therefore you don't need that license, and so it's easier just to implement, get the content, and bring it back. It's no
yeah,
longer a barrier for people to have. Um,
yeah.
does it chase you on the trail?
Yep, it does all of
Yeah,
that,
that's
and
cool.
it can, avoid obstacles, and I don't even think you need a control. Like usually with you have to have like a controller to drive the drone around. I think this one just kind of follows you, and you just tell it what to do with probably an app on your phone or something. I mean,
That's
they're just
cool.
making it easier and easier to make epic stuff, and that's great for everyone, both the viewers and the creators. And um, I just feel like more people need to really understand how to do this, and the tools are so affordable now. It's not out of anybody's reach for the most part. If you want to do this, you can do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a good one.
Sweet. Right on. Well, here we are. We did it. Thank you again for joining us the second time on the pod. It's good to have you, and
Happy to do it. I love it.
look forward to having Dylan back. He's just getting back on track after a pretty epic trip to UTMB, and yeah, excited to have him back. But this is good to have these discussions, and the insight that you bring to it is so helpful and so interesting. So
Yeah,
thanks
thank
again
you.
for being here.
Thanks.